Greetings, friends and future friends. Today's video is on the Korg Pa5x. And man, do I have a doozy of a tutorial for you guys today. Now, it's been asked to me many times, how do you take a style from the Genos and bring it into the Korg Pa5x? And let me tell you, after many hours of study, reading manuals, and watching other people's videos, and even looking for any little bit of information online I could find, I found out some ways that work and some ways that don't. Now, the way I'm going to show you today, it seems to be the way that works well for me, and I found it to be more accurate. You can get that data in there more accurately. But remember, just because you bring in all this MIDI data into the Pa5x, it's not going to sound like the Genos. You're still going to have to assign sounds and effects and mix things right to make that thing sound great. So let's go into the studio and see how those things work. Okay, let's get started. Now, I enlarged the screen on my PC so you can see it better, especially if you're watching it on a phone. So the first thing we got to do is go to our folders and bring up the folder that we're working in the project with. And you can see I already downloaded California Moody Blue T554. And that's a style right from the Genos library. And what we do is we go over here and go rename it. And then what we're going to do is change it to a MIDI file. All we got to do is change this area right here to MIDI, which if you look up here, I already did. So now California Moody Blue T55 is classified as a MIDI file, and the software will accept it as a MIDI file. Okay, let's open up our software. Now, I've been using Cakewalk. I've been using it for years, and I remember back in the day, it was one of the only software platforms that actually you could edit MIDI. And I still think it has great MIDI engines, but you can use any software you're using. You should be able to do the same thing. Okay, now that we have the software started up, let's bring up the file. I have already loaded in here so we can make the tutorial a little quicker. And here you go. Now what this is the MIDI file of that style that we brought in from the Genos. And the only thing we did was we changed the back end of that. Instead of saying STX style, it's .mid. And you can see it's got all the MIDI data. And if we look at the markers, it has all the markers. Everything's looking good. Now, the first thing we got to do is we got to go in here and we're going to zoom in. For some odd reason, the Korg wants to have a direct fire of the first marker. And I've seen a lot of people tell me that you got to get rid of this first setup here, which what we got to do is go over to View, go down to Markers, and get rid of these two markers. Then what we're going to do, once we get rid of those markers, is we're going to come over here, and what we want to do is we want to take all this space right here and delete it. So we go to All in My Software, and when we do this, we delete it. It brings everything up close, ready to go. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to edit the markers. So we'll bring up Markers. And for some odd reason, this style, let's bring it up a little wider so we can see it. For some odd reason, you can see up here, there's like duplicates of the same time. And I don't know why it does that, but it does. And you can actually see right here, main A, and then FN:M main A, and it's the same time. So what we want to do is we want to go on all these FNs and get rid of them. We go down on all of them, all of them, all of them. And what we'll do is delete them. And then once we delete them, we'll see what we have here. Now that we changed all these markers and got rid of the duplicates, now you can see main A, fill in AA, fill in DD, and so on and so forth. Now what we have to do is change these markers to the code, or whatever you want to say, the marker language that the Pa5x will understand. So basically, main A would be, go to here and we go V1, CV1, and then we'd go down here to V2, so on, so on. Fill would be, we go in and go F1, CV1, and then all the way down here and do all those. Now the only thing, and I don't know why, but it just works that way the buttons are placed on the keyboard. I guess the Genos is different. When you do intro A, what you want to do, because this would be A, B, C, which would be 1, 2, 3. But on the Genos, I guess the board keys are different. So what we want to do is make intro A, go there, and we're going to make it I3 CV1. Okay. Then make this I2 CV1. And make this I3, or no, wrong, I1 CV1. So what you have is 3, 2, 1. And the same for the endings. You're going to come down here and go E3 CV1. Okay. Over here you're going to go E2 CV1. And then down here you're going to go E1 CV1. Okay. And then of course the break is just BR CV1. And then of course you're going to go back here and change all these things and get it ready to export. Okay, now that we have all these markers changed to the language that the Pa5x will understand, let's export this thing. So go over here, export standard MIDI file. Now I've already done this, so I'm just going to click on it here. But what we did is Kali, Moody Blue, Pa5x, CV01, conversion 1. And the only thing I noticed also is it likes file format 0. And of course we save it, which we already have. And now we have a MIDI file to bring into the Korg. Now let's bring in that MIDI file we created from the Genos MIDI file. We took the Genos MIDI file and changed the markers to the language that the Korg Pa5x understands, but that's all we did. We just changed those markers. So let's go to Record Edit, Style Edit, go over to Menu, Import, and we're going to import, select. Now that Kali Blues conversion 01 MIDI file, we'll click on that, exit, and now you're going to see it won't bring it up. We'll do it again. Exit. It will not bring it up. So this Kali MIDI or Moody Blue Pa5x conversion 01, that file was a MIDI file that all we did was change the markers. We didn't change anything else in that file, but just change the markers. So we basically recreated a MIDI file from the Genos file, and you can see it just doesn't want to load. Go in there again, and again, it will not allow you to select that file to bring it in to create a style from that MIDI file. Okay, I want to show you that MIDI file that we created from the Genos file where all we did was change the markers. You might say it might have got corrupted, but if we go over here, hit Song, and we bring in that MIDI file. Now, this is the MIDI file that the Korg Pa5x will not allow you to bring in to create a style. But if we exit out of this, you can see it'll play. And if we look, we can see all the markers are there. All the markers. And if we actually go up here to fill, put a loop on that. So the MIDI file did not get corrupted, but it definitely doesn't have all the information that the Korg Pa5x needs to create a style. So now you see that that MIDI file just will not be accepted by the Korg. Why, I don't know. There's just some information that's on an external MIDI file that the Korg will not accept that MIDI file to create a style. But here's the secret, my friends, at least for me, here's how I worked that out. First thing I did is I took a style that's similar to the style I'm trying to replicate that came from the Genos, the same instruments and things like that. And then I took that style, exported it out as a MIDI file. Then once it was a MIDI file, I brought it into my software. And this is actually a MIDI file of a style that came from the Pa5x. Okay, I brought up this style, Chain of Fools, and it's pretty close style to the style I'm trying to replicate from the Genos. So the first thing I want to do is I want to export this style out as a MIDI file. So we hit Record Edit, hit Style Edit, hit Menu, hit Import Export. We're going to be on Export, Execute, and we're going to go to my USB drive, exit, save, and now what it's doing is it's creating a MIDI file. And if we exit out of all this and we go to File and we go to Korg Transfer, now you can see on my USB drive, Chain of Fools MIDI is there. So what we did is we took a style, it transferred it to a MIDI file, and I exported it out to the USB drive. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the markers. And if you look at the markers, there is a lot of markers in this style. But there's a lot of markers that they're not needed really. You know, for what we're going to do. We're trying to transfer a Genos style into the Pa5x. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of all this. Like, we know the I1 CV1 is important, but all these other markers are not, and they're just cluttering up the thing. So I'm going to go on here like this and go all the way down, and here's I1 CV2, go over here, and I'm going to delete all those markers. And then I'm going to come over here and go down and all the way down here and delete all those markers. Now what you're going to see is we're slowly getting a A7. We'll delete that. And what we're going to do is this A minor. We're going to get rid of that. Now you're going to see that we have I's, which are intros, F's, which are fills, and what we also see is our variations, and everything is looking good. So the next thing we're going to do is get rid of the chord variation 2, because we know that when we looked at the markers on our Genos style, or the style we're bringing from Genos, it only had a chord variation 1. So we're going to go in here and get all the chord variation 2s and eliminate them. Chord variation 2, there's actually a chord variation 3. We get rid of all that, and now we come down here, delete them all. And now you can see we have a pretty good idea of what's going on in this style. And although we might have cut some of its character out, we could still control this style with this. We have the intros 1, 2, 3. We have fills 1, fill 2, fill 3, fill 4, variations. Everything is here. Now, right or wrong, this is the way I did it. And it seems to work. It works fine. But it's not the easiest way to do it. So first, we still have this existing style. It's actually a MIDI file we have right now that came from an existing style in the Korg Pa5x. So this is a style we brought right out of the Korg Pa5x. So we're going to bring it alongside this other file. Now, to my right over here is the file that we created. It's actually a work file, but it's the MIDI file that we created from the Genos style. We came in here, and if we bring this up a little bit so you can see them a little better, we changed all the markers, and we formatted all these markers so that the Korg Pa5x could understand it. Now what we're going to do is take, and we'll go to CV1. CV1 is at V1, CV1. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and go to V1. And now what we're going to do is we're going to change the timing of the marker on the existing Pa5x file to match the file of the Genos. So version 1, CV1, over here, it's actually 1. So we're going to make this 1. Okay. Now we can see version 1, CV1 over here is at 1. Now we're going to go down, and now we can see over here, variation 2, CV1 is at 3. So we'll come over here, go variation 2, and that's at 3. So we're going to bring this and make that 3. Okay. Now we have chord variation 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep doing this. We'll go to variation 3, chord CV1 is 5. So we'll go over here, where's variation 3? Change this to a 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to replicate the markers over here and make them match the markers over here. So you're taking the markers from the Genos project MIDI file and you're bringing them into the existing file that came directly from the Pa5x. Okay, now that we replicated the markers on the left in the existing MIDI file from the Korg Pa5x to the file of the Genos, that's the first step we got to do. Now don't worry about these numbers on the left. They don't have to match up because the MIDI information on this file is different from the MIDI information that's on this file, the Genos file. So now let's go on to the next step. All right, let's get to the next step. And I think you can see where we're going. Now, let's go to the MIDI file or the project that we created from the Genos style. And as we know, when you export a MIDI file out of a style, the Korg only seems to export tracks 9 through 16. So I don't know what is up with the Genos where you have all these other tracks, but we know the Korg is only going to look at tracks 9 through 16. And if we look at it, you can see track 2 up here looks about the same as track 11. So there might be some duplication there, but we know we're only going to be able to take tracks 9 through 16 from the Genos style, which is a MIDI file, into the existing Korg file. Now what we're going to do is take the file, the MIDI file that we just exported out from the Korg Pa5x, maximize this, and now what we want to do is delete all the MIDI data. And get these things side by side again. Now what we're going to do is simple. We're going to take the tracks, the MIDI information from the MIDI file created from the Genos style and bring it into the MIDI file that we just exported out from the Korg Pa5x. So we come over here, do a copy, come over to track 9, make sure our cursor is all the way at the beginning, do a paste, and we bring that track in. We go over to track 10, do a copy, come over to track 10 on the file that we just brought from the Pa5x, and paste in the MIDI data that we got from the Genos file. And you do this the whole way down. Now that we brought in all that MIDI data, the markers, everything, all the information from the MIDI file of the Genos file that we created a MIDI file from the Genos style, then we brought all that information into a MIDI file that we created when exporting out a style from the Korg Pa5x. Then once I created that MIDI file, I brought it into this project and I actually created a project file. And now we have the MIDI file that was created by the Korg Pa5x when we exported the style, but now has the information from the MIDI file of the Genos style. So now that you have that all set up, the biggest hurdle you'll have right now is selecting the sounds. So let's go over here and make sure we're down to 9 and so forth, tracks 9 and 16. Now we know 9 was the bass, 10's the drums, 11 was percussion. I set up 12 to be piano, 13 to be guitar, 14 to be piano. And if I'm not mistaken, I think 15, I didn't quite do it, should be horns. And there you go. Now you have that set up in the software. Now I have a MIDI control coming from my software to my Pa5X. So if I play this track, it actually will play. The next big hurdle would be to go to the Korg Pa5X, and you need to adjust the sounds to match that up. But now we can go in here and edit this thing. And to do that is pretty easy. If we zoom in a little bit, we can now see these markers are all lined up. So if I wanted to edit variation 2, all I'd have to do is go over here and come over here like this. And your software somewhere should have this. And I assign a loop. And now I bring that cursor in here. And now we can edit. We can go in here and edit the drums. We come in here and want to edit the drums, do something different. Or if we want to edit the bass or the piano or whatever we want to edit, we can do that. And we know we're going to be looping only on variation 1. And same goes if we go over here to the fill. I can bring over here just one measure, mark that out as a loop, and if we play it, and there you go. Now, let's get rid of this. So, what you have done is you've taken that style from the Genos, created a MIDI file, taken a file from the Korg, a style, created a MIDI file, brought the 2 MIDI files into your software, and took the information from the MIDI file that you created from the Genos and brought it into the existing file or the file you exported out of the Korg Pa5X, and here's what you have. So all we got to do now is go over to here and do export. Of course, we got to do all. So we export everything. Go over, export, standard MIDI file, go to 0, and right here, Kali MIDI Blues Pa5X, conversion, final, MIDI. I click on that and save it, which I've already done. And now we're ready to bring that MIDI file into the Korg Pa5X. Okay, now what we're going to do is bring in a MIDI file into the Pa5X, and I think it's going to work. What we did, to recap, is we took and created a MIDI file from the Genos style, and we created a MIDI file from the Pa5X. Then what we did is copy-pasted all the information from the Genos MIDI file to the Korg Pa5X file. Then we set all the markers to make sure they're the same. So once we did that, I created a project. We exported that MIDI file out. And if we go to record, edit, style, edit, go into menu, go import, export, go select. Down here in the bottom, Kali Moody Blue Pa5X conversion final MIDI. We click on that, exit, and boom, it now recognizes that file. And if we select that file and we execute, it's going to import that MIDI file into this style. Now, I already did this because I tweaked out all the little things along the way to give you a good tutorial. But basically, I brought that file right into this style, and then all I had to do was change some instruments. So now we created a style. I saved it, and if I hit the E minor here, I hit an A minor, B minor, And what I'll do is bring this up, and you can see now this was the information brought from the Genos MIDI into the existing PA5X MIDI, and it works great. Watch this. And there you go, a style from the Genos brought right into the Korg Pa5x. So I hope this video showed you it's not easy, but it can be done. You can bring a style in from the Genos and bring it into the Korg Pa5x. Then with a little bit of fine tuning and adjustments, you can make it sound great. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. You'll help us grow the channel. That way we can bring you more cool stuff. So take care, my friends, and thanks for watching.